my note, and it says waiting for associate students Pasadena City College July 7th at 5:19.
The computer says that we're live right now.
Okay, why don't you share your screen so we can take a look? Note, and it says waiting for associate students Pasadena City College. There you go. You're live. It's working.
Can you share my screen? The computer says that we're live right now. Oh,
Yes.
Let me just hit exit real quick on that because I don't want to keep hearing my voice.
Yeah. So yeah, I've got it going. You are working.
Note, and it says waiting for.
Oh, damn it. What happened?
Just put YouTube. I just put YouTube on mute.
Okay. For a second, because I hit X at the same time, so I thought I hit something. Okay, sorry. As you guys see, I'm totally on top of this. Okay. Let me move on. Oh wait, that's the minutes. All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order at 12:05 p.m. and we'll start off with roll call.
Mackenzie?
Here.
Chris?
Here.
Christina? Louise? Okay. Christina?
Christina, are
Louise?
Here.
Okay,
Louise.
Louise.
Christina.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Alex?
Here.
Jasmine?
Here.
Kelly?
Here.
Emmanuel?
Present.
Kyle?
Here.
David?
Here.
All right, we've established quorum. Before we move on with business, I'd like to acknowledge that we are.
And I'm here.
Was that everyone? Sorry. Are we good now? Okay, I'm gonna go with that we are. Okay, moving on. Sorry. Now that we've established quorum, I'd like to, before we conduct any business, I'd like to acknowledge that we are conducting business on native land of the Hahamanga tribe of the Tongva Nation, and to give a moment of silence for those who came before us. Okay. Moving on, first we will approve the agenda for July 8th, 2020. If you see anything that needs to be changed or modified, please let me know.
I move to approve the agenda.
First by David, can I get a second?
I second.
First by David, second by Louise. I'm gonna call you by how I see you on my screen. Louise?
I.
Kyle?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Alex?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Okay. And then Jasmine?
Aye.
And Christina? Christina, are you there? Okay.
Aye.
Oh, there you are. Okay. All right, motion carries.
Can you guys hear me?
Did anyone catch what that was?
No, Christina, you may have to participate via the chat, or you could hang up. I will give you the phone number and you can participate via phone. You don't need to have the broadband to do the video. So you can type messages in the chat.
I'm going to move on to approval of the minutes for July 1st, 2020. Oh, wait. If everything looks good, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve.
Okay, first by David, second by Chris. I'm gonna go by roll call vote. Louise,
Aye.
Kyle,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Alex,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Jasmine,
Aye.
and Christina.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. The minutes have been approved. Moving on to agenda item 2, public comment on non-agenda items. Now, do we have any public comments on the YouTube?
No.
All right, moving on to introductions and reports, starting off with board reports. So I'm going to start with Louise.
I don't have anything to report.
Kyle,
The Constitution and started reviewing amendments for my presentation on Friday, and I've ironed out basically the details and things of which I want to report and show to you guys on Friday.
David,
Okay. So we have our Board of Trustees meeting next Wednesday. I still haven't had a chance to go look at the agenda because they haven't released it yet, but I'm sure they're gonna release it this Friday. So I'm gonna take a look at that. I just got off the phone. Me and Kelly got off the phone with one of the board members from SSCCC, and he did tell us that the community colleges of California and the UC and the CSU systems are planning on submitting a lawsuit to the Trump administration regarding ICE and the regulations. So that's definitely something that we should be focusing on in terms of advocacy. And other than that, I don't have any else to report.
thank you for your report. Alex,
I completed the sign up genius for the faculty to attend our meetings, which I will be sending an email to y'all later today. And then over the next 2 weeks, I will be working on workshopping Welcome Week to get the details, like a rough idea of what I want to do for that. Other than that, I have nothing to report.
thank you for your report. Kelly,
So yeah, in addition to getting off the phone with the SSCCC representative, we're going to try to get our Pasadena City College voices by being elected to, I think they have 2 vacant positions, the legislative affairs and the director of regional affairs. So we're definitely going to,
I'll do it.
oh, sorry, Carrie, did you say something?
Never mind.
Okay. Yeah, in regards to the ICE and the whole situation, I kind of have like the beginnings of a plan of which we can take, and I think I would like to discuss that later on further down the meeting or maybe on Friday. And the director of regional affairs, so we're definitely gonna.
all right, thank you for your report. Emmanuel,
I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
thank you. Chris,
So I'm continuing to work with Carrie on getting some IT stuff set up. I will have more information as we go along with that, and just anticipate a training where I kind of take over and show you all how we're going to do stuff on the computer moving forward in the fall, considering that we are going remote. I am still also working on Lancer Life stuff. A couple of clubs have approached me about how to re-register, and a couple of clubs have done so already. So I'm taking care of any questions in regards to that. But you know, just slowly and surely moving along and doing the best we can. So yeah.
thank you for your report. Jasmine,
I don't have any.
Christina,
Okay, so I did email both the people that I would be working with, and they said that they'd be happy to come in and talk to us. And I'm also working on the statement about ICE from the associate students.
thank you for your report. Is there anybody I missed? Okay, move on to my own report. I was working with David on making our to finalize our timeline for our vacant positions. I'm working on making the flyers for those positions since we don't have a PR right now, so I'm just gonna make the flyer myself on this. Let's see. Chris was helping me the other day with making sure that we can make the YouTube up and running live stream. Thank you for helping me with that. And I'm setting up a meeting with not just myself and Erica, but also with David with David so the three of us can talk before the student trustee meeting to just go over any questions we have on the agenda items. Hopefully we get that agenda soon. And that's all I have for my board report. Moving on to financial report, we don't have any right now. Then moving on to advisor reports. Carrie and Jordan, do either of you have anything?
I do. Jordan, do you have anything? Do you want to go? Okay, I'll go. So one thing I do want you to get used to is right now, we're starting to do board reports. Francis will be sending you all a link to a Google Doc where you can upload your written report. So anything that you're saying, I would suggest that you write it down, because that way it can be cut and paste and directly into the Google form, that becomes part of the record. So that way it helps her with writing these notes so she doesn't have to constantly write stuff down. And so if you can have a list of things that you want to speak on, just type them up, just a few words, put it in there, and she can then access them. So, so for my report, so I've been meeting with all of you, and I think I've been finding that really rewarding, and hopefully you all have as well, just to getting to talk to you, figuring out where you're going to go. I know a lot of you have plans to transfer, and I think that's fantastic. But I've said this to a bunch of you, but I'm going to say this to all of you now. You need to keep your grades up. This upcoming semester is going to be very hard, and this is where we always see students kind of drop. So if you, drop their grades. So if you are a person that's got a really high GPA or if you've got a person who really wants to go to Berkeley, you need to maintain that GPA. And it's very, very easy to slip into a B, or let a B slip to a C. So when you're starting to register for classes and thinking about your classes, make sure that you maybe spread out your load. And that way this first semester is really hard, right? So try, and you're going to be, don't forget, you all are going to be doing applications. For those of you that are transferring, applications come out in a couple months and you'll be spending time doing those. So let's make sure you balance your schedule, maybe not take as many units as you have. Like if you can take 9 units and still maintain your health insurance and your financial aid, look at that and think about that. But also don't forget, you have to be enrolled in a minimum of 9 units to stay eligible for AS, okay? Chris has already said we're working on the tech pieces, so you'll be getting emails from us asking you to join something called OnePass. Please do that, because by joining OnePass, then we give you access to, we've got a Canva account, which is a pro account, so we pay for that. We've got a Sign Up Genius account. We've also got all these different accounts that we've established, so you'll be able to have access to those. So when you see it's OnePass, go ahead and follow those directions and sign in and join the team. A lot of you have spoken, a couple of you have spoken about the new changes in ICE rules for international students. I can't emphasize enough how important it is that we really come out and in support of our international students. This basically is going to mean that the majority of them will have to go home, and those of them that went home because they had to, because it was just too expensive to stay here and not go to class, they are now being barred from coming back. So it's really important that we come out and have that conversation about what to do with that. The other thing is that I attended a meeting this morning for the the chancellor's office, and they do a little report. And just so you know, the state of the budget. So as you know, that the income for the entire state is down the tube. There is a huge deficit that they will be having to make up. The governor signed the budget on the 30th, and luckily it did not cut anything that's called a categorical. So categoricals are like Puente, TRIO programs, C money, which is the student equity money, Dr. Michaela. So a lot of those funds have been preserved, but it comes at a cost. So basically the governor has said, we'll not cut your funding, but we're not going to give you money. Our money is given to us from the state every quarter. And what they're saying is, we're going to delay giving you this money until a certain time. So basically it's going to be a year out. So the college may not receive any funding until the 21-22 academic year. So that means there's going to be a shortfall of cash on the college's end. The state requires that we keep a certain amount in reserves, so I believe we are okay. But this will also mean that we're going to have to be creative with our financing and how we pull money. Right now, from what I understand, the money is there, but just so you're aware of that, and that's something that I think I spoke to David about following up with Mike Bush about money. And when we get a business person, that's a good thing. I also sent you all the meeting ID for Friday's meeting. And if you didn't get the link, please let me know, but I did send it out. And also those little things that we've asked you to do. So please make sure that you filled out the Google form that tells me how you want your name, not only your name tag, but also your business cards to reflect what names you want on that. And also please make sure that you sign in to Lancer Life, join associate students, so that way we can get you on the roster there. Other than that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Jordan, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, sorry, my dad's in the middle of a deposition for his workers' comp case, so it's been a horrible morning in the house. So I've just been going like back and forth. Wow, and now I totally forgot what I was gonna say. That's where my brain's at today, so I apologize. I am gonna send you the link and send you a quick sheet on Parley Pro after I give the presentation today. So I will send that all to you all, so that way you have access to it. If you have any questions, please let me know. I've been in a bunch of organizations that are pretty well versed in Parley Pro. Also David and I think Kyle too are pretty well versed with that as well, since they were both on the Supreme Council last year. Second thing, I start school in August on the 22nd, and I just want to request, and Carrie, I don't know if you've already said this, and Mackenzie, if you have, I apologize. If anybody needs me to advise a meeting during the fall, please let me know when and at what time, so that way I can plan that into my schedule. I have I'm just starting to plan ahead because it's like about a month and a half away. So the sooner you can let me know, the better. And so that way I can put you in, and that way we can talk about stuff moving forward. What else? Yeah, as you heard, so I have a meeting with Dean Cobb and Lindsay today after this about the status of the flea market, what's going on. So any of you that want to work, we'll let you know as soon as possible when the flea market will open up. Other than that, yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you for your report. Moving on to agenda item 4, shared governance discussion. Did anybody have anything they wanted to discuss based off the board reports we had, or any comments, questions, concerns on that? Okay, we'll be moving on to action items today. First, for action item A is approval of timeline for the vacant positions. So I have a little slide here to show. So the proposed timeline that I have is we will release our apps on July 10th, which is this Friday. So because I need to finish making the flyers, so we'll put them out on the 10th. And then we'll have the applications be due on the 24th. We'll be scheduling our interviews for the week of the 28th. And once we begin those interviews, the end of those interviews should be the 4th. And then from there, we'll select which applicants we want for the board, and we'll appoint them at the next meeting on the 5th.
On to present mode.
Oh, sorry, I was there. There we go. It's all bigger.
Okay, so applications will be put onto Lancer Life. This is July 10th, so as in Friday. So we definitely need to work together to get those applications together. A thing that we did last year was that we talked together about what kinds of questions we want to have on all of the applications, and sort of had we developed a rubric that we would go by. I know that last year, I'm not too sure whether this is like an employment requirement or something like that, but I know that we do have to have a sort of rubric to go by, and to have numbers to be a part of the selection process, so that students know that our selections were objective, and there's numbers involved. And when the student asks us, oh, why didn't I get picked? Are you discriminating against me? No, it's because these are the numbers that we went by, and these are the things that we took a look at. And so I think that's definitely something we need to talk about, what kinds of questions we want to have on all the applications. what sort of areas we want to take a look at, and how much we want to weigh each sort of things, like sort of like say experience or ambitions or what it be. So that's definitely something we can talk about right now or later.
Okay. Did anybody have any questions about the timeline here? Okay, I'll go on to the next slide. Just kind of review, we have the business affairs position open, and so some of the things that that position is going to entail is they're going to have to oversee not only just our AS budget as a whole, but they're also going to be working with each of you individually whenever you do have your events, because they need to help you make sure you have a proper budget. And yeah, pretty much that. They'll be working with Chris to help allocate ICC funding. So they'll be sitting in on his funding committee. They're going to be signing all of our requisitions, ARFs, chair their own committees, sitting on shared governance meetings. So just kind of keep in mind all these duties that they have when we are going through the interview process. So yeah, just keep in mind what it is that this position is going to entail when we're looking for someone to fill this position, and if they're going to be able to do all of their duties. The next position, we have public relations, which, as y'all know, they maintain our social media presence, they're publicizing our events, making our flyers, chairing committee, and yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory what it does.
For context, these people are the former, people.
Yeah, so just a little example in case you needed a face to go with the position. Yeah. And then also just keep in mind, we're also looking for a secretary, because right now we do have Frances, but she will be transferring to UCLA. So we need to find somebody else to replace her. So that application we need to put out as well, but that I'll probably bring up at our next meeting to actually approve that. David, am I missing anything?
I think that covers it.
Okay. So we have for the, I'm gonna go back to the timeline. Yeah, if everything looks good on the timeline, we can move forward on approving it if there's no discussion for it. Carrie.
Mackenzie?
Yep.
Can I ask that you add under the job description for the publicity, is that really you're looking for someone who's going to be the point of contact as well as the brand manager?
I know, really, like for social media, if there's ever, like, let's say if there's an argument going on book sale, that they would be the person who's addressing on behalf of associate students instead of our own personal.
So that needs to be made clear, but also I like the idea of, I would say, like, this person is the brand manager. Remember how Alex was always telling you how to write your emails and Jessica was correcting things that you put on your flyers?
Mm-hmm.
Because this person is responsible for the brand of associate students. So you want to make sure that that's something, you don't want to lose that.
Okay. If everything looks good for the timeline, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the timeline.
Motion up.
Okay, I heard first by Emmanuel and then it was second by David. All right. Sorry guys, I disappeared for a second. Okay, we'll bring it to a vote then. Louise?
Aye.
Kyle?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Kelly? Oh wait, Kelly, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye.
Jasmine?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
And Chris?
Aye.
And then Alex?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Our next action item is to establish working groups. So since we do have two positions, I would like to split us up into working groups on sitting in on these interviews and just going through the whole process, coming up with the rubric and everything. While we are going to confer, while we all will talk together on this, it really would be helpful to me if we can just split this up between all of us. So yeah, I just wanted to split us up into our working groups right now.
Okay, so who wants to sign up to be on the committee to look for business affairs?
Aye.
Okay, so Jasmine.
I can.
I think I want to do it too, just because I know clubs are going to be asking for money and we're going to have a process for that this time around.
And so I think Mackenzie did wanted to be on all of them. So I think she would be one for that one as well. So that's 4 people for that one. I definitely want to be part of public relations, so I'm put myself for that one. Who else wants to be on that one?
I can do public relations.
So Louise and Kyle. And Mackenzie.
I'll be on PR as well.
I think we already reached the maximum for that one.
Actually,
Yeah.
I hate to say this to you, David, but you and Kyle don't count for quorum.
I was meaning to. I meant that more so just because, having a lot of people on one committee makes it difficult for the same people to make it to the same interviews all at the same time.
It
Because
does.
if you sign up for a committee, you cannot, and if you don't make it to one of the interviews, you cannot make it to any of them anymore because that just makes it unfair.
It does. That is very true.
But Alex, did you want to be part of the secretary one?
Sure.
Okay.
Who is the 4th for business? Jasmine, Mackenzie, Chris?
I don't know why it's not updating, but I'm editing it onto the slides right now. Let me see.
There you go.
Yeah, it doesn't update when you present. You have
Okay.
to exit out.
All right, does anyone else want to be on the secretary one? Oh, Kelly? Okay.
Can I also be on the secretary one?
Who else?
Christina.
Christina, okay.
Emmanuel, did you want to jump in on the secretary since you didn't get in for public relations?
Yeah, I kind of wanted business, but yeah, that's fine with me, the secretary. Can I still contribute towards finding applicants?
Yeah, so
we're seeing.
we're all going to be looking at the applications together. So we're all gonna be grading them in terms of our rubric that we decide, and that'll be the determining factor whether we reach out for our interviews. These are just the groups for the interviews, so just so that we don't have a lot of people in the interviews at the same time. And we're also going to be part of the discussion for who we select afterwards too.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's everything for the working group, right?
Who's going to be the chair for the working groups? Are you going to be the chair for everyone?
I was going to, but realistically, okay. Ideally, I would like to be sharing each of these, but if on the off chance that something comes up, if I can get someone from each working group to just help me in sharing each of them, that would be great too.
Because also under this, it's kind of a vague thing, but you can also, I would suggest maybe you want to talk about now about setting the meeting, or do you want to talk about, because that may change who can be on each group. Or you could do it afterwards, but probably you've got your timeline, but you probably should talk about that meeting.
Did you guys want to talk about that now, or would you rather speak within your working groups after the meeting?
Probably easier to speak within the working groups afterwards, and then if we need to switch, we can probably just
Does everyone agree with that? Okay, we can do that.
So I could probably make the motion just to word it easier. So I moved to establish working groups where the members of the business affairs are Jasmine, Christina, Christopher, and Mackenzie, and public relations are David, Louise, Kyle, and Mackenzie, and secretary are Alex, Kelly, Christina, Emmanuel, and Mackenzie.
We have a first by David. Can I get a second?
I second.
Okay, second by Chris. Now we're going to move on to vote. Louise?
Aye.
Kyle? David?
Aye, sorry.
Okay. Emmanuel?
Aye.
Jasmine,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Alex,
Aye.
and then did I miss anybody? No? Okay, motion passes. Then we'll move on to discussion items, which our first one is parliamentary procedure brought to us by Jordan. I think you might have, wait, there he is.
Hi, everyone. So good to see all of you. I'm so happy. So giving presentations is something that I love to do. Mackenzie, I'm going to ask if you can stop sharing your screen so I can share mine really quickly. So how many of you have heard of parliamentary procedure besides David, Mackenzie, and the people? How many of you have heard of what it is or what it's for and all that stuff, right? Right? Yeah, okay. You guys can raise your hands. I'm going to ask for audience participation. I may do a magic trick. You never know. So my experience with parliamentary procedure started in Associated Students, and it was mostly something that I had to learn on the fly because as we did have presentations, I also had people in several of my groups when I was 3 years in AS that used it for certain things that, you know, was really interesting, and I wanted to know more about it. So I got in more groups that could do it. And hold on one second. Let me see if I can. Okay. Here goes. Okay. So that's not the first page. Okay. So another group that I joined was the Pasadena JCs, which is the Junior Chamber of Commerce within the greater area of Pasadena. And so I kind of took the slides that they used for their presentation. It's a little bit more easier to access. It's a little more easier for you to understand, okay? So the first thing we're going to want to talk about is what is Robert's Rules of Order, right? So what it basically is it's a set of rules that dictates how a conversation goes within an organized body, right? The Board of Trustees use parliamentary procedure. AS uses parliamentary procedure. The United States government uses parliamentary procedure. The California government uses, so every group that has been established that is large uses parliamentary procedure as a way to conduct business and a way to discuss business in meetings, right? What is really cool about Robert's Rules is that everyone has the right to speak once if they wish before anyone may speak a second time. So what it allows us to do is it allows the conversation to happen, but it also allows for everyone's voice to be heard if they want it to be heard, right? Now your voice can look different, right? I like to talk a lot, so I don't mind giving my opinion in a meeting. Others don't. And the way that they can voice their opinion is by voting, right? When you guys say or when you all say aye, when you all say nay, or when you say abstention, that is your way of sort of like voicing your opinion for anything that you're voting on, right? Everyone has the right to know what is going on at all times, right? So we're going to learn about a couple of motions, a couple of points of orders where I can say, excuse me, Mackenzie, I have a question, or I have a point of information. And she'll say, okay, what is it? And then you can ask your question, and then whoever can answer the question will go ahead and do that. So it's a way to sort of like I said, direct conversation in a way that's more productive to the body, right? There's going to be certain points of interest and points of clarification that can interrupt the speaker. Most of the time, though, about 75% of the time, you're going to have to get permission from Mackenzie to speak if she calls on you, right? So yeah, that's the general idea, right? So where did it come from, right? So it's got a long history. It started early with English parliaments when they started to govern over in the EU. It came to America, obviously, with the first settlers, and it became uniform in 1876 when Henry M. Robert published his manual on parliamentary law. If you all don't have it, Kyle, you should get a copy. David, I know you have one. I don't know if you passed it down, but everyone should have a copy of an abridged copy of Robert's Rules of Order, which is basically also known as parliamentary procedure. If you don't have it, I think AS has one. I'm also sure I can get one online for free, so I'll see if I can do that and just send it to all of you. It's very lengthy, but it gives a detailed explanation of what parliamentary procedure is, right? there's a it gets revised occasionally throughout the years, depending on what works, what doesn't work, much like a lot of other procedures that happen, right? So why is it important? Well, it's a time-tested method of conducting business, right? This is something that has lasted for hundreds of years, and it's worked in regard to sort of helping organizations conduct business, right? What it means is it's democratic, it's flexible, it protects the rights of the majority and protects the rights of the minority, right? So if there's people that, you know, let's take for example, right? The Senate right now is majority Republicans right now. So since they're the majority, it protects their rights, but also it protects the rights of the Democrats that are in the Senate, because they get a chance to speak and they get a chance to say their opinion on what they want to happen, right? It gives everybody a fair chance to be heard on anything, right? On everything that happens in an organization, excuse me. So you all are already familiar with how to make motions, how to second, how to do all that, right? There's certain motions that are called certain things, right? So one presents a motion, right? That's like somebody like David earlier who just said, I move to approve this, this, and this, right? And then somebody will second it. And so that means that that motion is supported. If a first motion is not supported by a second motion, then the motion dies, right? If for any reason, let's say, for example, David made a motion, right, to approve all these working groups, blah, blah, blah. But then you found out that there was a flaw within those and you have to go back and you have to sort of re-edit the motion. You can do that, or you can retract your motion and say, I just retract the motion altogether, and then it gets stricken, right? There's debate motions where when Mackenzie asks for discussion, right? She's gonna say, okay, is there any discussion? There might be some, you know, things that you might wanna talk about that might not make sense in regards to making that motion. And so you do a debate motion, right? And then ultimately you vote on motions. That's how you make a decision on what the body is gonna do about that motion, right? It's important to note that anybody can make a motion except for Mackenzie. Mackenzie can only suggest making a motion. She cannot say I move, because Mackenzie is the chair and Mackenzie's the president. Anybody that is present at the meeting can make a motion and can second and can vote on the motion, right? So just that's very important. Mackenzie is also not allowed to vote unless it's for a tiebreaker. So if, let's say for some reason, 5 of you vote for one thing, 5 of you vote for another, and somebody abstains, right? I think that's 12. Okay, well, let's say one of you abstains, and then there's like 10 of you that you're gridlocked, right? Mackenzie can make the motion, and either for or against it, that will either the motion will pass or it won't pass. So Mackenzie is basically the tiebreaker and the middleman with the entire organization. So main motions, like we said, for example, I move that we purchase, or I move to approve, right? You always want your motion to be in the affirmative. So you don't want it to say, I move that we don't purchase, right? Because that's not how parliamentary procedure works. What you can do is all affirmative motions. So I move that we purchase. If you don't want to move that we purchase, then you vote no on that. And then if it passes or it doesn't pass, depends on that. Are there any questions in regards to that? Does that sound confusing? No, everybody get it? I can't see all of you, hold on. Okay, cool. It's weird, I can't see all of you because I'm in presentation mode. Okay, so you always want to do in the affirmative, and this is going to take practice, right? It's going to take a couple meetings for us to get used to going, I move that we do this, or I move that this is what we're going to do, okay? Subsidiary motions are things like, if, let's say, for example, discussion is going too long on one motion, somebody can move to call the question, which means that people are going in circles, they're saying the same thing, and that gets the conversation back to the main motion, which is on the table, right? That's a little bit tricky. You kind of don't want to use that as a way to shut people up. If you feel that the conversation is going too long, or if Mackenzie feels like the conversation is going too long, she can end debate, and then she can ask the main motion, or somebody can move to call the question, right? But like, I know Carrie's struggled with this before in the past, where people have used it to try to not get people to speak. And that's not okay. You want people to have equal amounts of participation if they want to. You also don't want to encourage people to speak up if they don't want to, right? For example, I have no problem speaking up or getting my opinions from talking, but somebody, let's say like Lindsay, or somebody that's a little bit more quieter, likes to think about it and may not want to say anything during debate or during discussion. So it's really important that you don't force people to speak, but you still give them the opportunity to do that. There's privilege motions. Privilege motions are things like, I move that we adjourn for 5 minutes to take a bathroom break. Like if people need to take a bathroom break and your meeting is just going way too long, you can move to do like a 5-minute break and then you guys can come back. That's what's called a privilege motion, which means that you can interrupt the chair talking. These are things like, I move to call the question is a privileged motion. I move that we adjourn is a privileged motion. And other things like that. I'll give you a chart which shows you what these are. So if you're kind of confused, that's what it is. But that's what's called a privilege motion. Incidental motions are things like, I move to suspend the rules for the purpose of, right? Let's say, for example, you have to suspend the rules to approve a deadline within a certain time, right? This has happened before, especially when I was in student government, where there was an emergency that happened and something needed to be resolved within 24 hours. Well, we called an emergency meeting. We all got together. We had to suspend part of our policies to make sure that we were serving the amount of students that we could. And so that's what's called an incidental motion. And they usually arise out of other motions. So like if somebody makes a first and you can't approve that motion without suspending some policies, that's what an incidental motion is. So you can make an incidental motion during a main motion, okay? Any questions, comments, concerns so far? Okay. If you have any questions, just please interrupt me. I'm not the chair, so you can interrupt me. So some questions relating to motions. Is it in order? Your motion must relate to the business at hand. So if, let's say, for example, you're talking about approving a budget to do a virtual student event, right? If somebody makes a motion to approve an on-campus student event, that's not in order. And Mackenzie has the right to say that's out of order because it has nothing to do with the motion or the discussion that was happening or the action item that you all actually are on, right? So that would be considered out of order. May I interrupt the speaker? So about 75 to 80% of the time, you cannot interrupt the speaker without Mackenzie calling on you. When Mackenzie calls on you, then you can go ahead and make a motion or you can ask something. There's only certain times that you can interrupt the speaker, and those are those incidental or the privilege motions that I was talking about. You always usually need a second. A second indicates that, you know, another member would like to consider your motion. So if you want to discuss an item, somebody has to second your motion. If nobody seconds your motion, then it dies and it doesn't happen. Okay. The only time you don't need a second is like a point of privilege or a point of information, where if I say, excuse me, chair, point of information, I need to ask you a question and this is the question. You don't need a second to do that because that's a privilege motion and that automatically gets heard by the chair. So is it debatable? So parliamentary procedure guards the right to free and full debate on motions. However, some subsidiary, privileged, and incidental motions are not debatable. Things like, excuse me, or I call the question. Those are not debatable. But you still have to vote on it, right? So somebody goes, call the question. Mackenzie will say, there's a motion on the table to call the question. All in favor, please say aye. And then you have to give all your ayes, or you have to give all your nays, or you have to abstain from it, okay? It's not debatable to call the question because it's a privilege motion. Again, I will give you a chart to show you what privilege motions are and how they operate. If you need more detail, you can also email me, or we can set up a Zoom meeting to kind of run through all of this. So amending motions gets tricky, right? My philosophy, because I've had to do this a lot, is the more you amend a main motion that's on the table, the more confusing it gets, right? My philosophy is if you can retract the motion and do a different motion, that would be the best way to do it. Amending motions gets very, very tricky. If we have to do it and it comes to that, I'll guide you through it as best as I can. but usually I don't encourage people to alter or amend motions that are already on the table. What vote is, so most require only a majority vote. If you've read your bylaws and policies and procedures, you already know what you need. And usually majority vote is for you guys, since for you all, right now, how many do you have? So you're missing 3, right?
2.
You're missing, oh, you're missing 2 members?
Yeah.
Okay, so 12, 11, 10, you need 6 people, or 5 plus 1, which means you need 6 people to have a majority vote in order for the motion to pass, right? If it's 5 and 5, then Mackenzie, or if it's even, then Mackenzie has to break the vote. But most motions require a majority vote. Some of them require 2/3, some of them require everybody. So you have to look within your own policies and procedures to find that out. Some motions can be reconsidered, but again, this is almost like amending a motion. It gets tricky. So the less you want to do that, the better it's going to be. And in order for a motion to be reconsidered, somebody has to put it on the table from the winning side. So let's say, for example, there's a motion on the table and it doesn't pass, right? There were mostly no's. If one of those no's says, actually, I want this motion to be reconsidered, they have the right to do that. And so the body has the right to vote on whether they reconsider it or not. This is the little chart that I'll have for you guys for you all that I will be sending to you. This is just a little description on what happens and how you can raise the question. So let's say, for example, you want to give closer study to something, right? Like if the discussion is there's too much discussion going on and Mackenzie sees that, okay, maybe this is something that we might want to look into, you can refer the matter to a committee if you have a standing committee, or you can create one. That gets a little tricky as well, but if there's a standing committee, you can refer it to them because the discussion needs to be hashed out more, right? When it says end debate and amendments, that's what I talked about before when you want to call the question, or you can say, I move the previous question, which basically means, okay, conversation is going on too long, we're going in circles, let's just vote on it. This is the order of kind of making motions. So, and what happens during a meeting. Not all of these are gonna relate to you and what you do in AS, but these are just ways of looking at how it is. So the main motion happens. You can either postpone indefinitely, and these are just all the ways that you can do it. And so these are just order of voting and motions. I will also include this. This is basically what is debatable, what isn't debatable. Can it interrupt the speaker? Like I said, most of the time you cannot interrupt Mackenzie unless you need to do a question of privilege or a point of privilege, which is basically somebody says point of privilege, I need to use the restroom. If you're going to lose quorum, it's very important to do a point of privilege because you might need to take a break if you're voting on something, right? So let's say, for example, you guys are doing a motion, right? You're going to lose quorum. Let's say, for example, if Louise or Christina has to go out of the room. They have to do a point of privilege and say, I need to use the restroom. Can we take a 5-minute break? And then you guys have to vote on that. And then you guys can take a 5-minute break. So this is just a nice little cheat sheet for you to look at in regard to that. Also just some other ones as well. I'll be sending this to you. So just go ahead and take a look at these whenever you have a chance to do that. These are subsidiary motions. So these are things like postpone indefinitely, which means you're going to postpone the voting of this and you have no date or time of when you're going to do that. That gets really confusing, so you might not want to do that. Amend, refer to committee, postpone to a certain time, limit or extend limits of debate, previous question, like you call the previous question, or lay it on the table, which means you set aside temporarily to respond to later on in that meeting. These are all privileged motions. Again, things that I've mentioned: adjourn the meeting, raise the question. These are ones that can interrupt the chair. Yeah. So you already know how to do that. How do you present a motion, right? You come up, you have action items, right? You wait until the last speaker is finished, and then you say, I move or I move to, right? Do all these in the affirmative. That's basically how you present a motion to the table. Once it's complete, somebody has to second it, and then the motion can be discussed. You cannot have discussion without a motion on the table. And that's very important to understand. So if there's an action item and somebody presents something on it, you cannot ask them questions until you present a motion. Does that make sense to everybody? What this allows.
So Jordan,
go ahead.
So this is the question, because we actually operate differently. We bring the item to the table and people have discussion, and then they usually go to a motion. And what they usually forget last year was always to offer discussion after the motion has been made. So when we look at Parley Pro, is that a hard and fast rule, or are we allowed to adjust according, as long as we're consistent in our actions?
So what I would say is that because, let's say, for example, like the action item today to approve, I forgot, but the approve standing committees for running applications. Basically, the motion is there. Somebody just has to make it, and then you can discuss that. The trouble with having conversation before, and I kind of saw this last year, the trouble with having conversation before is the conversation can go off topic, versus if you have a motion on the table, you can't go off that topic, otherwise it's considered out of order. If you want to keep it that way and you want to just keep discussion before and then make a motion and have discussion after, we can do that. Whatever you want or functions better for this body. I just think it's better when somebody makes a motion and then you have discussion after, because then the conversation can be specifically to what that line item or specifically to what that is. But I mean, technically you can't have discussion without a motion, technically, right? Like they don't do that in Congress and they don't do that in state government. But since we are a student government, things can be a little bit more adjustable.
Okay. My recommendation is that we continue with the way we do, because what I've often found is that people who make motions without having discussion on the item, that's when the motion needs to be amended. That's when we get into all this. I need to retract my motion. I need to amend this motion. Mackenzie, I would say as long as you are consistent and keep the same practice, we can let you all decide how you want to run this. Okay.
Yeah, I think I mean during my years it was the opposite. So we would make a motion and then have discussion. But again, like you said, Carrie, it all depends, and especially Mackenzie, like it's also going to depend on how you run the meetings. If you feel like it's more efficient to run the meeting the way that it has been meeting, I would say keep to status quo. But if you want to try the other way and see that that's more efficient, then we can try that and see if that works. But if this way works for you, it's whatever you want, how you want to run the organization. Again, just make the motion. I move that we blank. Instead of, or I move that. You cannot say I move that we do not, or I move that we not approve this budget. You can't motion in the negative. You have to be affirmative. And then if you don't like the motion, you can vote against it. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes? Okay. Obviously you wait for a second. You already all do that. It's really great. And then Mackenzie, you have to repeat the motion that somebody said. It's just important. So that way, if let's say, for example, David makes a motion, Kyle seconds, but Luis didn't hear the motion, you repeating it will help Luis say, oh, that's exactly what we're voting on. Great. That's, and it's just nice to kind of have like people for clarification. So that way people don't ask all these questions that are off topic. So to expand on the motion, mover is allowed to speak first. So if, let's say, for example, David says, I move to do this, Kyle seconds, he's allowed to speak on the motion since he made it. But you need to direct all your comments to the chair, because the chair is basically the point person in the conversation. Also, this is a really great point to reiterate. Parley Pro helps us to conduct business and keep personal matters out of business. So that's really important. So if somebody votes against your motion, you cannot take that personally, because that's maybe not what they want to do. I've seen groups and I've seen organizations, including Associated Students, where personal feelings and why did you do that gets put into how a motion happens, and it turns out very ugly. I told the Supreme Council last year, I said, there was a time when we had, and Carrie, you will remember this very well, there was a time when we had 3 articles of impeachment up because people put in their personal opinions in everything and in all the meetings that happened. I'm here to say that that was probably one of the worst years I've ever had in student government and in any sort of organizational body like that. It was very divisive and it was very uncomfortable for me. And so when people are voting and when you make a motion and you direct all your comments to the chair, it kind of helps to get those feelings out in a way, not necessarily like, I hate this motion because it's X, Y, and Z. You're allowed to state your opinion when the chair calls on you and you're like, okay, cool, we need to have discussion on it, or we have discussion before, right? That's when you can tailor into the fact that, okay, look, this may be affecting these students, right? It may be affecting LGBTQ students, Black and African American, core first students, right? That's when you can do that, is during discussion, and you're allowed to have people hear your opinion. But once it becomes personal, it becomes dangerous. Please just keep that in mind when you are voting and speaking. Keep in mind, Mackenzie is allowed to not call on you, but for fair practices, I haven't really seen this, and mostly the chair gets to everybody, but Mackenzie gets to dictate in what order and how to do all that. Again, Mackenzie's sort of like the middle person and the mediator for the meetings, so you got to direct all your comments to her, right? So once you vote, the chair announces the results. Usually Mackenzie will say, okay, motion passes, and that's it. And then you can move on with the next item of business. So you all already know the different types, the voting on a motion. Usually right now what you do is you do roll call because we are virtual and because we need everybody to vote on something, you usually do a roll call. In person, people can just say aye or nay because it's easier to look at who's saying aye or nay and for the secretary to write it down. You can do by show of hands. That is also another way to do it. Or you can do by ballot. A lot of this doesn't, ballot are only for things that are like sensitive and things that require like sensitive information, like hiring somebody or doing anything like that. You can also do by general consent. So Mackenzie can say, if there is no objection, then this motion passes. You can do that, but I would say we should just stick to doing it by voice or by roll call like we have been doing. It just makes it a little bit easier and a little bit more transparent for us to do that.
So Jordan,
Yes.
State of California passed a law 3 years ago that requires roll call votes. So Mackenzie can say vote by acclamation. And if there are no abstentions, or if no one abstains or objects, then the record will need to reflect that everyone votes yes. But other than that, especially with COVID and Zoom, Mackenzie, you're going to have to do a verbal roll call vote for everybody.
Yeah. Which I think is also a really good way to just if people want to vote and don't want to vote, they can say. So that's basically it. Do you all have any questions, comments, concerns? Do you have anything? Anybody at all?
Yeah, I have one thing. So if, for example, in Zoom, we have the raise your hand option, could that be considered your consent for a motion? Or it has to be verbal?
So I would say I think because it's a live thing and because like people on YouTube can't see the raised hand, I would say that we need to keep it by roll call, only because because we're like doing live streams. And on top of that, that's something that you would all have to agree on as a body. But my recommendation is to just not use that and to do by roll call or which we have to since we're on Zoom. Yeah. Anybody else?
I have a question regarding the amending the motions. So would a good example of that comment be like, I move to open up this as a discussion item?
So amending a motion would be something like, okay, so I move to approve a budget of not to exceed 1,500 for the virtual AS telethon or something like that, right? To amend that motion, you would say, okay, well then I move to amend the motion to say, I approve a budget of not to exceed 1,500 for the AS virtual town hall, that would be amending the motion because the previous motion was not that. So you'd have to amend that. I don't encourage you to amend motions. Like I said, I'd rather you all retract and then make a new motion. Amending motions gets very tricky. And on top of that, it's more work for the secretary to go back and try to figure out who did what, how was it amended? And generally it just gets very, very confusing. So I would just stick to retracting the motions and then making a new one. Carrie, would you agree?
Yeah, because it gets messy. But the thing is, you have to remember, once a motion has a first, and if it doesn't get a second, then it dies. So if it has a first and a second, generally, and then you realize there's a mistake, that's the only time you go back and say, I'd like to amend the motion. But then you also have to remember, Jordan, what's the vote on that? So if she makes a motion to amend, it has to be seconded. And isn't that a 2/3 vote?
I think it's either, yeah, I have to look, but I'm pretty sure it's a 2/3.
It might also be easier then for Jasmine to say, listen, talk to Christina, who was the motioner, Emmanuel, who's the seconder. Listen, that motion could be refined and be much more succinct for the record. So would you mind retracting? If the motioner or the seconder retracts, if one of them retracts and there is no person to take their place, then that motion then dies and that motion is then repealed and there's no motion on the table.
Correct. Yeah, it's generally, if this were a bigger body, right? If this were a bigger body and we were more of a Senate rather than an executive board, it would be a completely different story because, you know, people might bring up certain points and then, you know, all this other stuff. But since we are a smaller body, I would just recommend retracting and then making a new motion. That way it's easier to follow. People can say, oh, okay, this is what we're actually voting on, blah, 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 moving forward. If you need help with that, we can meet and I can tell you how to do that. Or we can practice in a meeting, either way, but we can work with that.
No, I just needed the clarification. Thank you for that.
So if anybody else doesn't have any questions, thank you. I will be back next week, I think, right, for time management?
Yes.
So yeah, but thank you. I will send all of the slides and I will send you the cheat sheets after this meeting. I have a meeting until 3 after this, so I'll send it after that so that way you all have availability to it. Which is a good, oh yeah, I have all your emails. Okay. All right, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan.
All right, thanks, Jordan.
I'm gonna share my screen again to pull up the agenda. All right, moving on to our second discussion item is AS social media platforms. This is something that Jasmine actually brought up to me. I know there's been some questions on like what social media we do have and how we should even be using our own social media. So I kind of just wanted to use this to kind of clarify on some things. So generally the social medias that we are using are Lancer Life, we have our Instagram, we use Book Sale. Yeah, I think that's all of our social medias. So those are gonna be the primary tools that we're using to promote to our students, but also I know there's also been a question of whether or not you each have your own social medias for your committees. There are some that currently exist, like Student Equity does have its own social media right now. My advice on that though, I don't know if Carrie would want to jump in after this, but if you don't already have an existing committee social media, I don't know if it's necessary for you to create one just because we don't have that base for it yet. So we have the general AS account and we already have our following on there. So I have found that that's the best of our connections right now. If you know how to really network on your new social media and you trust yourself, you can go for it, but that's just my advice on that. Carrie, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Let me ask the group, does the group have any discussion about social media and like platforms?
The only concern that I would see is it's like a committee making statements in behalf of the entire AS, just because that responsibility is the public relations person. I mean, that's why that position exists, so that AS has only one single person making statements on behalf of all of us and being the face. But yeah, I mean, that would be something, I mean, that'd be a discussion to have with whoever fills the position, and to like, for every committee to keep that person in the loop on what they want to say to their, like in their social media.
Thank you, David. Did anybody else have anything else they want to add in or chime?
Because if we didn't make personal Instagram, they would just be using like the AS to get through like our message from our committees, right?
Right. And for all that, it'll all be managed by our PR person. So if you have a certain post that you want to make for your event, you would go through PR and they would clear it, make sure everything's okay, and they would be posting it.
I see.
And everything else.
Sorry, real quick, I have a question. If I wanted to start posting on the student equity Instagram, would I have to have the content approved by you, Mackenzie, and Carrie, or how is that going to work?
Okay, we would approve it like we usually would like a flyer, right?
Yeah, I think that now that's a new area because we've never had that discussion before in terms of it's the new flyer, right? I would say right now that you need to all probably just manage one account because I don't know that folks have enough of a followers on any one group to have a separate account. And I think once we get the new person in, my other thing is that I think your accounts all need to be branded similarly because right now we've got sustainability is branded as something that you would never identify it with AS. I think it all should have a certain look, so that's uniformity. And I think in terms of publishing on that account, it's almost like when you publish it, that means that's something that represents AS. So I do really think that some of that does need to be vetted. I don't think right now we are all in tune with the group's will to be able to allow folks to individually post. So I would say it needs to go to Mackenzie.
And then something else I wanted to add in on this discussion is your own personal social medias. As you know, you're all public officials and you're all representing the organization. And so we all just need to be careful what we're posting on our own accounts, whether that means you need to make it private, make close friends, or just be careful on the content you're posting because it may not seem like a big deal, but everything you post is reflecting more than just yourself. You're reflecting all of us as an organization, and all it takes is one bad apple to ruin the whole thing. So just something to keep in mind is just be cautious of what you're posting and what you're saying. Yeah, that's pretty much just something I want to put out there.
I'm going to jump on that. I'm going to bandwagon that. I would advise you all to reevaluate your social media posts and decide if you need a smaller private group whom you trust, who you can feel free to publish anything you want, and then go with that, or just rethink what you post. Only because not that you're going to post something wrong, but people are going to come looking for you. And I know a lot of folks who post pictures of their children, of their nieces and nephews, where they live, what they do. And I'm not sure as a public official, you want everyone to have that much information about you. Our whole world with social media has changed so much in this last year. You know, if you've got everything out there for everyone to see and they can figure out where you live, you don't want some fool showing up at your house, okay? And if you've got minor children like nieces and nephews that you regularly post about because they're cute, having ice cream, that can make them targets as well. So I do highly suggest that you go through your social media, and if you're just going to post family and personal things, that you select a certain few and it's a closed group, just for your own personal safety.
Did anybody have any comments, questions, or concerns they want to say on this item? Okay, if there's nothing else, then we'll move on with the agenda. Next, we have appointments to college-wide committees. I currently have none. Appointment to AS committees. No one has their committees up yet. Bill acceptance. Kelly, do we have anything?
I'm muted. Okay. I wanted to talk about like the whole ICE situation. There's no particular bill that I have in mind right now, but there are things that we can do. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that now or later.
Okay. Would we talk about that now or should we do on Friday?
Sorry, I was muted. So this is my question. Are you willing to call a special meeting? Can you get an agenda posted so we can have a special meeting?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
Are we, I'm sorry.
So there's that. And let me ask you a rhetorical question, although I'm going to freely admit I am out of order here because this is not on the topic. How many hours do we need to post a special meeting in advance?
No, 48.
48. Thank you. Good. Make sure you get that 48-hour mark. Thank you. I would ask Kelly, and maybe if Christina, you want to just chime in and just give out a quick report. We cannot have discussion, but just give everyone a very brief preview of what you would like to discuss on Friday.
Right. So I'm sure like most of us know the current situation that they are deporting students that don't have in-person classes. It's especially difficult for people that have already returned to their countries to return back because they're not allowing, obviously there's no flights, and it's just this whole difficulty during the coronavirus time. It seemed very convenient for them to place this restriction, as it's kind of just forcing all international students out of the country. And there are things that we can do. We can call representatives, we can email them. We have drafts and we have sample phone call kind of like scripts that we can all jump on and sign petitions and other things like that. And I'm going to compile, actually I have it like halfway done of student organizations, or not student, I guess like campus organizations on our campus that support either international students or students in need that we can also contact to see what their voices are and what they need, so we can get a better idea of what we should do moving forward.
Christina, did you have anything you wanted to add in on that?
Okay. Me and Jasmine are going to be working to put out a statement, as well as other references that students can also refer to. So we're working to get that out before the special meeting agenda comes out.
If that's all we have, then we can move forward with the agenda. Did anybody else have?
May I add to that? Is it okay to post it on social media after we create this statement? Because I feel like that would be, we can connect to more folks regarding the situation publicly on social media.
Nice. We'll be posting once we approve the statement we want, so we can post it all over our social medias, whether it's just the AS one, your personal one, we can put it out there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Did anyone have anything else they wanted to add in?
Wait, sorry, what are we on? I'm sorry.
This was kind of part of like bill acceptance, just talking about the whole situation with ICE right now.
Got it.
Okay. What we're gonna talk about on Friday. A little bit out of order, but.
No, I was just like, wait, what? Okay, but I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. If that's all we have, then I'm gonna move forward with the agenda. Moving on to public comment on non-agenda items. Carrie, do we have anything on the YouTube?
Carrie, you're muted.
I'm the only one on YouTube.
Okay. All right, moving on to announcements. Did anyone have any announcements they would like to make? All right, hearing none. All right, future meeting dates and times. Our next meeting will be July 15th. Any agenda items are due on July 9th. You can either send those to myself or Francis. If that's all we have, then I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting at 1:17.
I motion to adjourn.
First, all right, first by Kyle, second by Louise. We're gonna bring this to a vote. Kyle?
Motion. Aye.
Sorry, you're just the first one on my screen. Christina?
Aye.
Jasmine?
Aye.
Louise?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Alex?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Meeting adjourned. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. Yeah. And then, okay, are we good on the lag that I could stop the recording, or should I wait a little longer?
Give it just a couple seconds. Kyle's still voting.
Voting? I said aye.
Yeah, we're watching the YouTube. It's a lag of about a minute. Have to give it a minute before we could cut it off. Otherwise, it cuts off the meeting. David's voting. David, were you the last one to vote? Nope. Kelly, Alex.
I think
Who's
Chris,
the last one to vote?
I think it was Chris. And then, okay, are we good on the
You're
live?
good to
Like,
cut it.
stop the recording or should I?
You're good to kill
I heard my voice. Ugh.
it. Yay, good job.
It
I
still says live.
yeah, you're still live.
You have to hit stop on Zoom in and hit the end stream button on the YouTube controls too.
Really YouTube. Oh wait, I don't have the YouTube. I already exit the YouTube. What the heck?
No, up top here where it says live streaming custom service,